prayer
Yeah,
before we
sure.
start?
We can get going. Dear God, I want to thank you for the blessings you give us. And in the Garden of Eden, you made all kinds of fruits and food there for us to enjoy. And that's what we're going to do now. Learn how we can enjoy some food a little bit better and do that healthfully. Be with us in your name. Amen.
Amen. Well, guys, tonight a lot of you know I've been kind of doing baking. I have a little baking business on the side. And it's kind of been a journey for me regarding gluten. I am sensitive to gluten. I know this because if I don't eat it, I feel a whole lot better. I don't have as many migraines. IBS issues go away. I am not celiac, and I'll get into that discussion after I do the cake because there's a lot of questions. And Linda, I don't know how much you're up on the whole celiac gluten sensitivity stuff, but there's a lot of studies out there. If you have something that you're familiar with and you want to chime in once we get done with the recipe, please do. But what I'm making tonight is a buckwheat. It's a vegan buckwheat cake. Now, lots of people go, buckwheat, isn't that like wheat? Doesn't it have gluten? No, it doesn't have any gluten. Buckwheat is actually a seed. It's not a grain as we commonly think of a grain. Roasted, it's called kasha. So you see this in cereals a lot. Kashi, kasha, that's buckwheat roasted. So let's just get to it. I'm going to take my buckwheat flour. And buckwheat flour, you're not going to find it in the grocery stores commonly. This is something you will have to either order online. I actually found this at an Asian food store in Buffalo. And the thing about it, if you go to an Asian food store, it's relatively less expensive than what it would be online. So that was a cup of buckwheat. This is half a cup of almond flour. Almond flour is all over the place right now. So you can find that easily at Walmart or any other major grocery store. Now there's a difference between almond flour and almond meal. The only difference is that almond meal have the skins on. The almond flour are the blanched almonds without the skins. And it gives a little bit finer texture to whatever you're baking. I'm going to take half a cup of chopped oats. That's your old-fashioned oats, just pulsed in the blender for about 20 seconds. I'm going to take my 2½ tablespoons of baking powder, 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda, and 1/4 teaspoon of salt. On the recipe it says sea salt, but salt is salt unless you're going for a specific taste, and we'll just leave it at that. I do not have maple sugar. It calls for maple sugar. This is just a 1/4 cup of regular brown sugar. Pop that in there. Okay. The next thing that goes in is your flax meal. Now I keep this on hand because if you don't have eggs, it's a really nice thing to use in place of eggs if you're baking. It acts as a binder. So that is 1 tablespoon of flax meal. And I'm just going to stir this through the sieve, get everything combined. Now, you'll find flax meal sold just as it is, flax meal, in the grocery store. unless you want to refrigerate that right away, I wouldn't buy it. I would just get the flax seeds and I would grind them, get a coffee grinder and grind them in your coffee grinder. Or if you have a special blender that would grind those, do it that way. The reason is you don't know how long that flax meal has been sitting on the shelf, and it loses its potency, it loses its goodness, and it becomes rancid if it's not refrigerated right away. So get the flax seed and grind it yourself. Okay, so all my dry ingredients are combined. My wet ingredients, because this is a dairy-free as well, it's a vegan cake. What this is a 3/4 cup of almond milk with a teaspoon of vinegar. Now, I set this up early because it needs to do its little magic here. That's the first thing I did. This is maple syrup. That's a 1/4 cup maple syrup and 2 teaspoons of vanilla. I'm just going to add it to my milk mixture here with the vinegar. And then add it to the wet ingredients. I think I missed a step. We'll be okay though. So I'm going to add, because I forgot to put this in first, I'm going to add my almond butter here, which is 2 tablespoons of almond butter and 1/3 cup of applesauce. This adds the moisture and it also adds the fat to your cake. You don't have to add any more oil to your pan when you bake it. All you have to do is put a round piece of parchment paper in there on the bottom, and the cake will pull away naturally from the pan when it's done, so you don't have to worry about it sticking. Now, while this doesn't have gluten, you still don't want to over mix it. You just want to mix it till it's well combined. At this point, I'm going to add, where's my cranberry? I'm going to add cranberries. So the recipe doesn't call for it, but I thought, you know, why not? Why not? And I'm going to add some cinnamon. I probably should have added it to my dry ingredients, but if you forget, no harm, no foul, just go ahead and add it now. It's no big deal. Now, if this was a gluten recipe, I might be a little concerned, but notice I'm not mixing it, I'm not stirring it, I'm more or less folding it in to itself. Okay? This recipe would be really good for muffins as well. Okay, here's my prepared pan. Every good baker always prepares the pan before they start baking, and the oven is preset at 350. So you can see I just have a parchment paper in there. It's not been oiled, it's not been floured, no more grease. That's all it takes. Now you could add nuts in here too. If you want some more texture or some more flavor, that would be fine. I've also thought about adding some coconut. I haven't done it yet, but I might do it on my next batch. Okay, and then you level it out. Just level it out. That's it. I'm gonna pop it in the oven. And it's gonna be in there for about 20, 30 minutes. Let me see what it says here. Okay, it says 21, 25 minutes, but it also depends on your oven. You guys know if you have a hot oven or a cool oven, it just depends. Hi, Beverly. I guess she's muted. Okay. All right. So,
Hi.
yes. Okay.
She was just saying hi to you after you said hi to her.
Oh, okay. All right. So let me talk a little bit about gluten. Why is this a fad that people are going gluten-free? What's going on? Well, there's 3 good books. If you have a pen and a paper, go ahead and write these down. 2 of them you've probably heard of. One, the most famous one, is called The Grain Brain. The Grain Brain. All these are written by doctors. I didn't write the doctor down, but if you just Google The Grain Brain, you'll find the book. The other one is Wheat Belly. And then the third one is Happy Gut. Now, I looked at Happy Gut this morning, and this one seems to be probably the most helpful. If you're vegetarian, you kind of look at the principles. Some of these guys are really geared into the paleo diet, and that's a whole nother topic. Some of them are into the keto thing, which I highly don't recommend, but that's a whole nother thing. But it talks about gluten, and over the years, we have been discovering that gluten is causing more things, more issues with our health. There's a doctor, his name is Dr. Osborne. If you want to write this down, he heads up a website called glutenfreesociety.org. glutenfreesociety.org. And Dr. Osborne. So there's 3 different types of gluten sensitivity. One is celiac disease. If you have this and you have it in a severe way, you can't even eat off things or prepare food off of like cutting boards that have actually had bread, regular bread already on it, because the proteins within those utensils actually can come into the food that you're making. Even though it looks clean, it can come in and it can cause a reaction in your system if you have celiac disease. I know this firsthand because I have a good friend who's been celiac for at least 10 years, and she didn't know what was going on. The doctors didn't know what was going on. She had all the classic celiac symptoms, but they honestly didn't know what was going on. They thought she was allergic to something. So she went on a rice diet for about a month, and then slowly started adding more things into her diet. And over a trial of elimination, she began to realize that it was truly gluten that she was sensitive to. And since then, they've confirmed that she has celiac disease. And then there's people that are gluten sensitive, like myself. I suffer from migraines, IBS. I also get little red marks, little red rash things on my face sometimes. They have a thing called brain fog. So I know I've dealt with that, fatigue. And when I am off gluten, I'm doing way better, way better. There's also wheat intolerant, and that is not gluten intolerant. That is the wheat, something about the wheat itself. Keep in mind that celiac, gluten sensitive, and wheat intolerance it's often misdiagnosed because doctors don't know what to look for. It's an inflammatory response that causes things like arthritis. That's something I've been dealing with a lot lately. And when I'm not eating gluten, again, I don't have the pain in my wrists and my knees as much. It can cause acne, it can cause rashes, it can affect the thyroid. If people have thyroid issues, what they're discovering is that a lot of people who have thyroid issues are actually sensitive to gluten. Gluten can also contribute to heart disease, diabetes, ulcerative colitis, and some doctors even go as far as to say that gluten is a neurotoxin, and it can cause things like depression and other mental health issues. So how does this work? What's going on in the body that causes this? One of the main issues that's going on is that in your small intestine, you have these little finger-like things called villi. And when they're working, they work really well. They absorb, they even detoxify the system. It absorbs and detoxifies your system as things move through it. One individual said, think of a new carpet, a brand new carpet, and you have all the brand new fibers sticking straight up. And that it feels really good. It's good carpet. And over time, if a person is gluten sensitive, those fibers begin to flatten out just like a carpet. And they can no longer absorb like they used to. They can't detoxify like they used to. And you've all heard of maybe leaky gut. There's a protein that's activated within the intestine by the gluten that causes some of those leaky gut symptoms. So that's a lot of information. This is not a fad. I would suggest, though, that there are people walking around with migraines, maybe even depression, maybe severe ADHD, that if they went on a gluten-free diet, they might truly see some positive benefits of that. All right, so next I am going to make the cashew cream that goes on top. It's a yummy cashew cream. Now I've already been soaking the cashews. You can soak them up to half a day, especially if they're raw cashews, because they'll get soft really quickly. And then there's, I sent you, let's see. There's there's about a half cup of cashews, 3 tablespoons of almond milk, 3 tablespoons of maple syrup, and a 1/4 teaspoon of vanilla. And then I added some cinnamon. So at the blender here, we're gonna let it rip.
Man, mute's a great thing. I wish they had that on every blender. Yeah, just as a reminder for everyone, if they want to get these recipes, send an email to what's there on the screen. mountainjewatSDA@gmail.com.
So you blend it until it starts to glisten, I say. Glisten on top. If you have a super, this is a Vitamix, but I know there's the Ninja works really well. But there are some other good blenders out there. Now, this is the cake. Now I added the blueberries. And then you just take the cashew cream. It's nice and thick. I've made this before. It's really, really good. I put it on pancakes. And you just drizzle it over. And it smells great. You can smell the cinnamon. It's really good. There you go. So I'm not just so you know, I'm not going completely vegan, although I don't think it's not a bad option. I think it's a pretty good option to do that. But these are just some tricks to use. Flax meal is so important to have on hand, especially if you don't have eggs and you want to thicken something. I can't say enough about flax meal. I keep about this much ground up in my fridge, and I can add it to various things as a thickener. This is a general 1-to-1 gluten-free flour. You can use it like all-purpose flour, okay? This is something I use on occasion. There we go. Yes, the stuff is a little bit more expensive, but you can go to an Asian food store maybe, or you can buy this stuff online, okay? And it'll probably cost less than getting the pre-made. Again, the almond flour as well, you can get, you've seen it, you can get it just about anywhere. And Pillsbury also makes a gluten-free 1-to-1 all-purpose flour, probably going to be less expensive than Bob's Red Mill, but I will tell you the quality is going to be different. Not all 1-to-1 gluten-free flours are the same quality. Any questions?
Good job.
Thank you. Joe's dying to dig into that cake.
Yeah, looks good.
It is a denser cake. I'm going to experiment some more with it. Like I said, I thought about adding coconut. I think I'm going to add some banana. One thing about gluten-free, the consistency is not the same. But I've had a lot of gluten-free stuff that is really good. It's kind of like saying, well, I'm going to get all the vegetarian food, you know, the chocolates and whatnot, because, you know, I'm just going to stop eating meat and I'm going to go vegetarian. Well, you know, your stripples are not going to add up to your bacon. They're just not. It's going to be different. But that doesn't mean that stripples are bad. Okay. It's changing your palate. It's changing the way you think about food. Are you going to be satisfied eating that as you would a piece of chocolate cake? I don't know, but I'll tell you what, I'll sure enjoy it now. Especially knowing that if I ate a regular piece of chocolate cake, I'd wake up the next morning with some spots on my face. And I don't want to have spots on my face that I can't explain. So it's a good trade-off. So there.
Well, thank you.
Is it real moist and spongy, or is it?
It is very moist. It tends to crumble a little bit. Okay. Bob's Red Mill makes cake mixes that I've used. The texture is better because they add things like your guar gum and your xanthan gums and the binders that are really good. Some people think those binders are not very healthy. So, you know, it's a give or take. Personally, if I want a really good cake, I'm going to use that mix, okay? But if I want a healthier option, I'm going to use something like this. Somebody once said, well, people who go gluten-free, you know, eat more sugar and fat. There's more sugar and fat in the items. Well, yeah, if you go to the grocery store and you go to the gluten-free aisle and you're picking up the gluten-free product, yeah, there's going to be a little bit more sugar. There's probably going to be a little bit more fat because they have to put something in there to make you like it and want to eat it. I mean, that's the same thing as if you buy a low-fat version of any baked item, there's going to be more sodium in there, or there's going to be more sugar in there. If you buy a low-sugar item, there's going to possibly more fat, or there's going to be more salt. Those three components, fat, sugar, and salt, is what makes food taste good. So, you know, I personally, on a gluten-free diet, I'm going to, oh, another person said, well, you're not getting your fiber. Well, I don't see how you can say that, because if you eat plenty of fruits and vegetables, or you eat plenty of raw fruits and vegetables and beans, I'm sorry, but you're getting all the fiber you need. That's not an issue either. Now, it's hard because I love bread. I mean, my mom used to make bread when I was a kid. We all have that smell. It's an emotional, relational thing we have with bread, and I miss it. I can't tell you. It's awful, but I don't want everything that comes with it. So you just have to move on, or you get stuck with your brain fog, you get stuck with your funny rashes, you get stuck with IBS, you get stuck with depression, you get stuck with all of that. It's a trade-off, and personally, I'd rather not have all of that stuff. Okay. I don't know how I could talk forever on this, but are we good?
We're good.
Okay. Linda,
Thank you.
Do you have any comments on this? Have you run across it? I'm just curious.
Well, I've had patients who've had celiac. I think the biggest problem, and you basically mentioned it, is the cost. You know, I went into Wegmans and compared the wheat products to the gluten-free, and you know, you paid almost double for it. But you're also right. You know, I remember somebody came in one time and said every time their kid had chocolate, he had an asthma attack, and they wanted to know if he was allergic to it. And I thought, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to answer that question. So
Yeah.
I think you have to decide, you know, am I happier not having problems because of eating wheat, or am I better off listening to my body?
I think the other thing we need to look at is you go to the gluten-free section, and there's these things that are, you know, okay, that's the only things I can eat now is just the things in this section. Well, you know, Chex Mix, rice Chex Mix, now they put the label on gluten-free now. Well,
Yeah.
they've
Sure.
always been gluten-free.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, green beans, they're gluten-free. They don't need a label, you know. And so we need to look at those kind of things too.
Absolutely.
You're not limited to just those things.
And I'll do some more experimenting if we want to continue down this path, because I agree. it can be more expensive, but there are ways to get around it. So
So I don't know if we want to take a break for a while. I mean, next week for sure is Memorial Day. I'm thinking Labor Day. I'm in good shape, but anyway. But at least, you know, we can revisit and see if there's an interest to continue through the summer. Or just maybe wait and see what happens in the next month or two.
Yeah, see how things go. I'll post this again to the YouTube.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'll put the link to the YouTube with the recipes. I'll send out the recipes to Linda and Annie and Bev. They're my list of people who want the recipes and stuff. So I can
Yeah.
always add the link to that.
Yeah, and then it's the link from this when I
Yeah.
post this tonight.
Yep.
Okay.
So
Sounds good.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank
thank
you,
you.
Teresa.
thank
Bye.
you.
And I'll stop by tomorrow to pick up the cake.
Okay. You'll have to fight Joe over it though.
That's all right.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.
Bye.
I feel good.
Yeah.